welcome. You're watching Head to Head. I'm Antonina Antosha with UATV. Euro-integration remains one of the main priorities for Ukraine. Last year, the Ukrainian parliament supported in the first reading the bill on amendments to the constitution regarding Ukraine's strategic course to obtain a full membership in the European Union and NATO. Now, the president of Ukraine, Petro Poroshenko, said the final voting for the constitutional amendments is scheduled for February 2019. To talk more about this, we're welcome to our studio today Bohdan Bondarenko. He is an expert at the Center of Policy and Legal Reform. Hello, and thank you for coming.
Hello, nice to meet you.
So, as I have already mentioned, the next session of the Verkhovna Rada is scheduled for February 5th, 2019. How high are the chances that starting this day, our deputies are going to be looking and voting in the second reading for the amendments to the Constitution?
In my opinion, the most harsh chances for the whole history of Ukraine that this bill will be voted in the second reading. First of all, we should understand that it's part of the PR and the part of the pre-presidential campaign for the presidential elections. So that's why the members of parliament will vote on this bill in February, and in the March 31 it will be the elections of the president. So that's why it will be there some separate opinions on this bill. But if you understand that the 5 of 6 factions in the parliament say that they are pro-European parties, so that's why they haven't got any chance to vote in another way. So if you talk about that, we should remember the history of this process. First time when I heard about these proposals for constitutional amendments was, as I remember correctly, in the beginning of spring 2018. In the same time, the president said that he wants to establish and incorporate in the Constitution of Ukraine our Eurointegration NATO course. After that, for half a year, there were a lot of discussion about these proposals of the president, and in September 2018, he put the bill in the parliament, which says that the amendments to the constitution should be to the preamble, to the 4th, 5th, and 6th chapter, and the last provisions. So after that, the discussion on this opinion starts in the parliament, and as the constitutional procedure said, it should be this bill should be put to the constitutional court. The Constitutional Court said that, like in Ukraine, we have the mandatory pre-constitutional control for the amendments to the Constitution, which should be made by Constitutional Court, and that's why the Constitutional Court should make the opinion that if this bill is constitutional or not. So, Constitutional Court said all is okay, and after that, the members of Parliament voted in the first reading. So now we are waiting the second reading, and after that, it should be the part of the Constitution.
How long is it going to take? How long is this period going to take from the moment of the deputies voting for the bill into the second reading on to actually those amendments being implemented into the Ukrainian constitution?
It's like the kind of the standard procedure, like the laws. If you talk about the 1st, 3rd, and 13th chapters of the constitution, we should have the all-national referenda on this process. But in the case of this bill, we put the amendments in the different and another chapters. So that's why after the voting, after the signing of the president and the speaker or the head of the parliament, it should be put in the constitution. After that, it starts to be the part of the constitution.
Will these amendments actually speed up Ukraine's Euro-integration and Ukraine joining NATO?
Before answering this question, we should understand what really is the part of these provisions and new proposals here. So, first of all, the president says that we should change and make the amendments in our preamble. In the preamble, we should put declare our European identity and the vision of the Ukrainian people to be in the European Union and NATO. So, in this case, we should understand that we talk only about the vision and the course, not the real membership in the European Union and NATO. If we understand this thing, we understand that I will talk more later about it, but it cannot really create real legal consequences for this case. So the second one thing, and the president says that we should make amendments in the different chapters which belong to the Verkhovna Rada, president and the prime minister powers. So in this case, the Verkhovna Rada will be authorized to determine the implementation of this course. The Prime Minister should ensure this implementation of this course in the executive policy, and the President should act like as a guarantor of this course. And the third one is part is going to the military forces in Ukraine, but it's not interesting in the case of if we talk about the Eurointegration NATO course. So first of all, if we talk about these provisions, we should understand one thing. So all of Ukrainian citizens and also the representative of Ukrainian states should make their doings under the constitution. So the constitution is obligate for them. But if we talk about that, that in the constitution will be the provision that Ukrainian has vision of the course to be in the European Union, it is impossible to check our doings on this provision. So was it legal or illegal if we talk only about the course? So only one way, if it is possible, in the case when the Prime Minister, for example, not Prime Minister, in this case will be better to say government, President or the Parliament will adopt some regulations. For example, it can be law or the decree of the President, which on the opinion of, for example, 45 MPs, it's unconstitutional because it isn't not so Eurointegration, so haven't got such Eurointegration vector of this decree. After that, they can apply to the Constitutional Court, and Constitutional Court can say, yeah, in this case, something is bad. But it's really hard to imagine how the Constitutional Court would do it, because the first thing which should Constitutional Court do is to understand is there, for example, law provision constitutional or not. It isn't the obligation of the Constitutional Court to compare how Eurointegration, how the Eurointegration vector or the course or something like that is implemented in this new law, for example, if we talk about the Verkhovna Rada. So. To make some conclusion that, on my opinion, it is very hard to say that this new provision will really create some legal consequences for our life or, for example, the state mechanism.
I think that right now would be fair if we actually clarified what kind of amendments we're talking about.
So in this case, the most important amendments, they are related to the powers of the different branches of power. So first of all, Verkhovna Rada, the amendments should be in the 85th provision of the Constitution, and the which regulate the powers of Verkhovna Rada, and the new provision should be like as I remember that the parliament starts to be they start to have the obligation to implement the strategic course of the Ukrainian people, like on the if I talk about the Euro-Atlantic course in this legislation. The Prime Minister and the government, they should ensure this in the executive policy. And the most important and hard to understand for me is the powers of the president. So we talk that the president can act as a guarantor of this Euro-integration, and Euro-Atlantic, we'll call that like that, Euro-Atlantic course. And the presidents haven't got any specific powers to act in this case. For example,
what are the specific powers that are needed particularly for?
For example, if we talk about that the president is the guarantor of our constitution, he has the different powers. For example, he has the right to veto the legislation. He has another power. He can apply to the Constitutional Court to ask Constitutional Court make some legal provisions unconstitutional. So there are some specific powers. In the case in the case of Euro-Atlantic course and this matter we're talking about, it is impossible by this constitution, because only one real thing that president can act is to influence on the government, but it is unconstitutional under our model of in our model of the different branches of power.
Is this uncertainty we've just discussed, is it possible that it will somehow delay implementing those amendments?
I don't think so, because it's not under the bill of the proposals which was proposed of the president. For example, if they will vote to delay this implementation, we should go back to the beginning of the procedure and go to the Constitutional Court with this draft of law, because this is a specific procedure of constitutional amendments. So it is impossible after the conclusion of the Constitutional Court to make some changes in this bill. If you will make some changes, you should go back and apply to the Constitutional Court for this new opinion. So also we have like the different specific problems of this draft of law. First of all, that we talk about the full membership in the European Union and NATO. But in the same time, the statute documents of these two organizations, they haven't got the terms like full membership. So they have only membership. They haven't got some full membership. But we are going to have the full membership, so it's hard to imagine how it should be. Yeah.
Let's go a little bit deeper into the Ukraine-EU Association Agreement. It came into force in 2017. But Ukraine is expected to boast of some kind of results based on this association agreement by 2030. My question is, how are we doing so far on the road of achieving those goals set to us?
So first of all, as I understand correctly, you remember that 2030, that was the words of our Prime Minister and the Minister Klimkin. So first of all, we should understand that the process of the constitutional amendments and the real Euro-integration process, there are two different processes.
Of course.
So if we talk about the Euro-integration, the real Euro-integration, the main obligations on exercising these association agreements are on the government. And there are some NGOs which monitor the situation with the exercising the European Union Association Agreement. And for example, in 2018, in the beginning of this 2018, our Prime Minister said that we exercised this agreement on 62%, as I remember correctly. But at the same time, the NGOs said that it was exercising only on 13%. So there is like
misinformation.
Sure. We don't know who is right in this situation, but we understand there are some different and specific issues from like which compares if we say the conclusions of the NGOs and, for example, from the Prime Minister. So first of all, there are problems for our Euro integration process are on our side, because like we should understand that first of all we have elections in 2019 and two different elections, and it can be sometimes it can be, like some experts said that for example, if the different candidates will take power after the elections of 2019, the process of Euro integration can be like more difficult than it's on this moment. But for me, it's very hard to compare these things, because the Euro Integration Association, it's a very huge document which has a lot of different areas where it should be done. So, for example, we should implement some decrees of European Union, some regulations, etc. It's a hard process for our economy, and at the same time it's a long process. And I cannot say that our integration should be, for example, to some 25 or 30 years. It is impossible to say now at this moment, because we have a really long way for Euro-integration to be the membership of the European Union, for example.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
That was Bohdan Bondarenko. He is an expert at the Center of Policy and Legal Reform. Thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned with UATV for more.